Hi, everyone. It's Jim Wertz. I'm here today with Tracie Fountain. And Tracie Fountain is a certified public accountant who is running for Auditor General here in the Commonwealth. A lot of folks are paying attention to politics. We've got a primary on the horizon scheduled for April 28th, and no one's quite sure yet how that's going to be affected by everyone social distancing and staying at home. So we're trying to put all the pieces together, but it makes for an interesting campaign season. Folks would normally be out going door to door this time of year, supporters for each of their candidates, knocking on doors, making phone calls, and trying to promote their candidates the best they can. But that's not happening this year. So we're trying to bring the campaigns to you electronically, and one way that we're going to do that is with conversations with candidates right here at eriereader.com. So Tracie Fountain, you are our first conversation with a candidate. And if you would, why don't you introduce yourself to the folks here in Erie? You are from the eastern part of the state, so they may not have gotten a lot of opportunity to get to know you yet. And please, by all means, take a few minutes to introduce yourself and tell us why you're running for Auditor General.
Thank you, Jim. Good morning, everyone, and thank you to the Erie Reader as well. As Jim said, my name is Tracie Fountain, and I am a first-time candidate running for Pennsylvania State Auditor General. I live in Dauphin County, but I'm originally from Pittsburgh, from Allegheny County, born and raised in the Hill District area. And I'm also a graduate of Drexel University, so I spent 5 years in Philadelphia. So I've covered 3 of the main areas in the state of Pennsylvania. I decided to run because as a CPA and working for the past 4 Auditor Generals, and when I say past 4, I am including Eugene E. Pasquale in there. He's still our Auditor General. He's running for a congressional seat. But I've worked on the administrations of 4 Auditor Generals, serving as Bureau Director of 5 different audit bureaus for the past 22 years. And I've watched administrations, new auditors generals come in and things of that nature, and it's always been a politician. I have such vast experience in that department, and the other thing that's going on there is that the department has suffered some severe budget cuts, which I believe are due to politics. Because as our work got better, it seemed like our budgets got smaller. And so we had to, I've been in an environment where we've had to do so much more with less. And actually, when I started with the department in 1990, we had 800 employees statewide, auditors, that would be auditors and managers and senior staff. And as of November 1st, the department was down to 392 people statewide. And that's all a result of budget cuts, not getting the sufficient appropriations to maintain staffing levels. And that's really a significant problem for the department, because we're responsible for 5,000 mandated audits annually. So whoever's elected the next Auditor General is going to have to deal with this problem. And they're going to have to make very, very serious decisions as to where those limited resources are spent. I know the public loves the special performance audits and things of that nature. And I would venture to guess there's probably about 15 to 20 special performance audits that may be released annually on average. But the department's in a situation where the next Auditor General is going to have to make some serious decisions about, do I do a special performance, or do I do my school district and charter school audits? Do I do my municipal pension plans audits? What do I give up? And so I have a lot of ideas in terms of how we can do more with less in the department, based on what I've done in the audit bureaus that I've run in my experience in working with the staff in the department.
Tracie, let's unpack this a little bit for voters who may not be super familiar with what it is that the Auditor General does and what that office is all about. And I think when you talk about special performance audits, I know for us commoners, that's kind of over our
Okay.
heads a little bit.
Okay.
We're not CPAs, and we haven't spent a lot of time in the machinations of government. And
Okay.
so why don't you start by telling everybody a little bit about what the day-to-day for an auditor general might look like, and then unpack some of those differences. What is a special performance audit? Why are those things important? And what are the alternatives, or what are the other roles that an auditor general plays?
Okay. All right. Well, I'll start with the Auditor General's department itself, because you make a good point, Jim. As I travel around the state campaigning, it has become very aware to me that while citizens of Pennsylvania, a lot of them are familiar with the elected Auditor Generals, but they're not necessarily familiar with what we do in the Auditor General's department. So the Auditor General's Department is one of Pennsylvania's 4 row offices in state government, in Pennsylvania state government. So when I say row office, I'm talking about the governor's office. Everybody has a pretty good idea as to what the governor does. I'm talking about the state treasurer's office. Once again, the state treasurer, they're pretty familiar in terms of what they're responsible for in terms of paying our bills and investing Commonwealth funds. The Attorney General, that's the 3rd row office. The Auditor General's office is that little known 4th row office. And what the Auditor General's department is responsible for is auditing any entity or persons receiving state funding to verify or determine that those funds were used for their intended purposes, and also to identify any fraud, waste, and abuse of those funds. And we do that by conducting audits of when I say mandated agencies, I'm talking about the Auditor General's office being established and by the Pennsylvania Constitution, and the fiscal code detail in the fiscal code that details which entities we are mandated to audit by law. So those are going to be your 500 school districts, your charter schools, your municipal pension plans, your departments of education, your departments of revenue, your departments of state, things of that nature. Any entity or person receiving state funding, but by law, we are mandated to do about 5,000, of those entities per year.
Okay.
Okay.
And from your perspective, will you change fundamentally how things run in the Auditor General's office, or is this this is kind of a larger bureaucratic institution that rolls along on its own? So how does an Auditor General get to put their stamp on the organization?
The Auditor General gets to put his or her stamp on the organization, mainly based on how the staffing that they hire, when you're able to hire, and also the entities that they choose to make priority for auditing. And a lot of that is done with the special performance audits now. Because when I mention special performance audits, I'm talking about those audits that are performed that are over and above our mandated audits that look at issues that are very, very important to Pennsylvania citizens. For instance, we don't have a mandate to do any audits on climate change per se. But that is, an issue that most Pennsylvanians are very concerned about. So that was one of the special performance audits that Eugene had issued in terms of looking at what programs may have been out there, and were they meeting their intended purposes. So when you talk about special performance audits, performance auditing in general, you're talking about evaluating the results of programs, government programs and things of that nature, and what they're mandated to do in determining whether they're actually meeting those mandates or performance goals. Okay, as opposed to just if we do a mandated audit of a school district, we're looking at subsidy entitlement. we're looking at board minutes. Did they follow the laws, the regulations, their policies and procedures of the school board? It doesn't necessarily look at whether program objectives of that school are being met. So you have a difference between financial versus performance.
Sure, sure. Listen, campaigning has changed here recently. As you said, you're not out hitting doors anymore, and everybody's trying to communicate in different ways. How can people find your campaign during this time of isolation, and stay in touch with you and all that you're trying to do leading up to the April 28th primary?
I have a campaign website, and that is tracieforpa.com, and Tracie is spelled Tracie. I've just learned how to use Zoom, so this is my second Zoom interview. I had an endorsement meeting on Zoom earlier in the week, so I think that this is an excellent opportunity for us, because I don't know if this is easier or harder for me, because being a first-time candidate, the only thing that I was expecting to do, was the door knocking and the telephone calls and the forms and things of that nature. And we were picking up a lot of speed. Let's see, I think it was March 13th. It was Friday the 13th. That was our last, for the Auditor General's candidates. There was a candidates forum sort of quasi debate that was down in Philadelphia, and that went really well for me. And then everything else that was on the schedule after that just got canceled, and I'm like, oh my goodness, what am I going to do? Because being a first-time candidate running against these seasoned politicians, I have the least amount of name recognition, so I'm going to be impacted the most. So what I'm also trying to do with my campaign manager is do more on social media, do more sharing, do more. I've done a couple policies and things of that nature that I've issued, one of which, well, I just sent her one yesterday, so that one hasn't been issued yet. But the one that I did issue that's on the website has to do with increasing or monitoring and oversight of grants awarded to nonprofits, because there was an issue that happened in the eastern part of the state with relatively newly elected state representative that had been charged with misusing grant funds for a nonprofit that she had run before. I think it was before she had it before she was elected, so I'm not sure if she was still running it at the time that she was elected a state rep, but there were allegations that that nonprofit money, I think it was to the tune of maybe $400,000 or $500,000. It had been misused, and used personally. And I've seen during my course as bureau director of various audit bureaus that there's a lot of mismanagement of programs, not necessarily anything related to fraud, waste, or abuse, but one thing that I've learned in my history as a Auditor General employee working for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania is that we have a lot of employees who have been around for a very long time. And sometimes we fall into a situation where we do things the way they've always been done. And what that leads to sometimes is us not keeping up with technology or not keeping up with new fraudulent schemes and things of that nature. So, or just not doing, maybe program people not doing an assessment of what policies and procedures need to change, because when you think about program people with the Commonwealth, their mindset is such that when they get that appropriation and they're dedicated to running that program and they know they want to get the services out there, and then their thinking also can be sometimes, hey, if we don't get this money out there, the next time, the budget is done, we may be cut. And so they don't want that to happen. So sometimes that means that, there aren't assessments being done, to keep up with actually monitoring for those program results. And that's why performance auditing became so important.
Tracie, you've given us a lot to think about today, and a great overview of what happens in the Auditor General's office. I want to thank you for your time, for taking a couple of minutes to sit down for these conversations with candidates. Again, if folks are interested in learning more about Tracie, they can go to Tracie4PA.com. That's Tracie4PA.com. To learn more about Tracie there. And as a PSA from the Erie County Democratic Party, I'd like to encourage everyone to go to votespa.com, VOTESPA.com, and apply for that mail-in ballot. Pennsylvania now allows you to vote by mail. Let's make an effort to ease congestion at the polls and make sure that every ballot gets counted. So you can vote early by applying for that mail-in ballot at votespa.com. Tracie, thanks again. Thanks so much for your time and for taking the leap to be a candidate in 2020. It's a big step and a big decision, and we're grateful for folks like yourselves who take that leap.
Thank you so much, Jim. Thank you for your time and this opportunity.
You got it. Have a great afternoon.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.